Welcome, everybody. We are now live. I'm going to be speaking about how cities are using artificial intelligence to become smarter. But first, I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I started studying smart cities, um, I think over 15 years ago when I was in New York. I had been on Wall Street for many years and was fascinated by how machine learning was improving productivity. And I wanted to understand how one could do that at an urban scale. So at that time, people were not really calling it smart cities, but then it became very in vogue. And I decided to do my PhD in smart cities. And I went to the London School of Economics and I started studying specifically in Germany, in Berlin, how they were digitizing and transforming the transportation sector to become more personalized, more sustainable, and more customer centric. And a large part of what I want to do today is think about how far we have come and what some of the really big trends are when we think about smart cities and artificial intelligence. So here's how I'm going to structure this conversation. I'm going to talk about four main topics. One of them is how cities can be resilient and sustainable. The second one is what is the citizen experience? The third one is how does one govern these cities? How can you have security and governance in the cities? And finally, are cities going to eventually become hybrid cities? Are they always going to remain these physical cities that we're so familiar with? And I'm going to take each one of these topics and speak for about 10 minutes on all of them, and then have 5 minutes open for Q&A. So let's start. The first thing that I want to talk about is how do you make cities resilient and sustainable? And the most important thing when you're planning a city is to have the information to put the right thing at the right place. And I'll give you an example of this. In Barcelona, there was a project that was about building super blocks. And these were car-free mini neighborhoods around which traffic would flow. The idea was really simple. The city, like most cities in the world, have a huge problem with air pollution. And what the city wanted to do was to reduce traffic, because traffic contributes a huge and significant amount of air pollution in a city. So if they could reduce vehicles by, let's say, 20%, then they could imagine that it would actually become an amazing place for citizens to live. And the air quality would improve. So this was the plan. And by the way, if you've been in any city, you'll realize that there is a huge amount of stress that comes from being also in commuting. So people in the United States, people also in United Kingdom, European Union can spend up to 200 hours a year just commuting. And from my personal experience, I was in Bangkok day before yesterday, and I spent 2 hours in the traffic getting from one end of the city to not that far away. So it's a natural desire to make cities more sustainable. But here's what happened. They knew that within these blocks, and if you look at a map, they had this amazing Barcelona map, and they were going to create car-free zones. And this is not new. New York has done this, London has done this, Singapore has done this. But because they didn't have any data, they could not do the analysis that the impact on emissions in the wider area would be negligible because air pollution within the superblocks had become better, but pollution had grown in the adjacent seats because the traffic had shifted to other seats. This doesn't mean that the superblocks were bad, but it showed that the planning did not achieve its ultimate goal. And one of the people who had planned this said that if he had known that this scenario would have unfolded, then they might have tried another strategy. And that's where digital twins come in. What is a digital twin? Essentially, a digital twin is a replica of a city where you take all of the information you can have, such as the map of the city, all the traffic flows of the city, all of the density in terms of urban population in the city. You look at weather patterns, you look at seasonal patterns, such as how people are in festivals or other things like that. And then you start to make scenarios that if I changed one thing, what would happen to the whole rest of the city as well? And in Barcelona, as I said, they had a plan. It was a good plan, but it had all of these externalities that the air pollution got worse in nearby roads that they hadn't expected. So Barcelona then decided to build a digital twin. It's actually housed in one of the city's oldest chapels, which is quite beautiful. But it has a Mare Nostrum supercomputer, and it's located within this chapel. And it has housed the supercomputer since 2005. And the purpose of this supercomputer is the following: not to have flawed policies that are implemented, but to have policies reveal themselves to be flawed by experimenting on scenarios. Given all the data you have, you can imagine, where would the traffic go? How would it flow? Would this increase the population? How high are the buildings nearby? You know, it seems like a lot of data, but this data fundamentally changes the way we would build a smart city. Now, digital twins in themselves are not new. They are essentially there to allow a government and the private sector that works with it to have virtual experimentation, to have test bedding, and to have informed decision making. Now, Singapore, where I'm right now, has a $73 million data-rich live digital replica. And here's what it's built on. Singapore's digital twin is built on 14 core datasets. It includes 3 million images that are captured at the street level, 160,000 images taken from the air, along with billions of data points about the buildings, about the traffic, about the residents that are all plotted in 3D. And that is at a minimum 100 terabytes of raw data. When you have so much data, you can actually begin to predict. For example, if you built a road somewhere or a bridge somewhere, what is the impact it would have on the heat in the neighboring residents' homes? What would happen to traffic flow? And this kind of scenario planning with digital twins allows you to do it before a single brick is laid. Digital twins are being built in Florida, in Helsinki. They're being built by developers like in Orlando. The digital twin was made with the help of game developer Unity. And it's a circular room with LED screens showing 180 degrees, mapping every inch of the region. Las Vegas, Los Angeles, New York, Phoenix, they're all building these digital twins. So that's the first trend I want to talk about: resiliency and sustainability, and the need to use artificial intelligence by gathering data and having a digital replica of the city. The next pillar is essentially citizen experience. And so, what I'd like to do now is go on to that and talk about what is citizen experience in a smart city. What we're finding is that um, the old way of thinking about a smart city is very much about the technology. But the new way of thinking about a smart city is really about the customer experience. And increasingly, this is because you have people who are used to Facebook and Amazon and others. And this is one of the things that is more than just about the technology. So let me give you an example. In Singapore, what we have now is that we are becoming a super aging society. This means that we are aging very, very fast, at one of the fastest rates in the entire world. And 1 in 4 people will be over the age of 65 by 2030. Now, a lot of old people, when you think about what you should do and how you should take care of them, the old way of thinking about it was that, oh, let's take their house and, put sensors everywhere and put cameras everywhere and put artificial intelligence in it so that we know if they are falling, then we can immediately alert somebody. If they haven't taken their medication, we can immediately alert somebody by looking at this data, by looking at this computer, and the computer vision can actually be able to analyze if somebody is fallen or not, if they've taken their medicine or not, if they're happy or not. Well, that is a very technology centric approach. And sure, that is one of the important things. But really, you want to always step back and think in this case, what are some of the biggest problems the elderly face in the world? And here are the 3 top problems the elderly face apart from being unwell. Number 1, yes, it is injuries. We have people fall down and injure themselves. Number 2, it's loneliness. Old people die of loneliness in cities. And number 3, it's accidents, car accidents. So once you have identified the citizen and their quality of life, and here one particular demographic, which is people above 65, then you go back and start designing how you will improve your city for them. In the case of Singapore, they started making smart homes. So Housing Development Board, which provides subsidized housing to the majority of Singaporeans, is experimenting with smart homes. And yes, in the smart home, the child will know if mom is at home, if mom needs help, if mom is active in the kitchen, if moms fall down, immediately the doctor is called. If mom is has fever or is unwell, again the carer is alerted. But what about the other 2 things? You see, the other 2 things mean that we also need to create a Singapore where the elderly don't feel lonely. And here, like any AI term or team, you need to have people, interdisciplinary teams. And you need urban designers and anthropologists as well. And so they decided that they would put senior citizen homes near playgrounds and parks and preschools. Because traditionally, we have put senior citizen homes very far away. If you go to America or other places, there are these expensive nursing homes far out, away from the crowds, the delightful crowds that exist, or old people live alone. So when you have nursing homes near preschools, you can see that the elderly are surrounded by joy, by laughter, and there is this intergenerational approach. Not only that, Singapore also is making intergenerational new cities from scratch, where autonomous vehicles are used so that there are no accidents. Because we know that if autonomous vehicles go slowly and are on roads which are very linear with a lot of safe testing, the artificial intelligence in them works. It's only when they have unexpected situations and they're not tested thoroughly that there are accidents. And so entirely new districts are being made in Singapore that don't have cars. So now you've solved all three problems, two of them with artificial intelligence, which is autonomous vehicles and smart homes, and one of them by thinking about anthropology, sociology, and psychology. And I think that's the essence that we need to think about, which is how do smart cities create amazing experiences for citizens without only thinking about technology. Now, that's for older people. If I was to think about younger people, I think one of the things that has been really phenomenal has been what India has done with creating the trifecta of systems. Number one, they created the identity system so that everyone has an identity. Pakistan also did this with the Nadra card. They did with India did with Aadhaar. Singapore has SingPass. Secondly, they created a payments infrastructure. So the unified payments infrastructure of India is the digital infrastructure that the government made so that everyone can make payments easily. And the third is that by collaborating and partnering or allowing the private sector to come in, India allowed Reliance to launch its own geo network by which it was giving and plans to give a $12 mobile phone to over 300 million Indians who have no education. And there are already 725 Indians who own mobile phones. What happens when you have an identity, which means you can be identified, a payment system, so you can receive and send money to be an active part of the economy. And lastly, you have access, a mobile phone with smart data at a cheap price. So you have access to digital education, digital work, digital health. So the most fundamental thing a government can do is build identity and payments infrastructure and then allow the private sector to build on top of the telecom infrastructure. And that has been especially important for the citizen experience of young people, because young people really value the ability to access digital services. And these are the kinds of things where you become a citizen experience and citizen centric infrastructure. Now, with payments, you can do so much. You can provide them subsidies using artificial intelligence. You can provide them education subsidies. You can provide them food subsidies. You can nudge behavior for healthy eating. And all of this is incredibly important. And in Singapore, we have a health application, which is all around for all citizens to actually become aware of their health, to have all their blood tests, to have all of their doctor's visits in one place. And then the AI can eventually nudge them when it's built to engage in healthier eating. So I'll stop here. The second pillar for me was the citizen experience. And I welcome any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Rizwana.
Hi,
Go
Dr.
ahead.
Nisha. Thank you so much for sharing such an amazing use cases on smart cities. As you mentioned, that the importance of smart citizen experience and how India is focusing on its UPI app. So I would love to hear your opinion on whether our seniors can also benefit from this payment apps, because the seniors are not very tech savvy and they are not used to of mobile phones. So in smart cities, you how you can say that how we can make the process easy for them.
Rizwana, I think that's a great question. And actually, a lot of us have not given seniors enough credit. But actually, the Reserve Bank of India has revealed that 50% of digital payment users are above the age of 45. And all of these young seniors, if you're 50 in Singapore, you call it a young senior, are actually adopting digital payments. And in many countries, such as Singapore, you also have digital ambassadors that help seniors and onboard them onto digital services. It's incredibly important if you're going to have efficient services such as even the Dubai Now app in Dubai, that you have the ability to cater to every single part of the population. And using artificial intelligence, you can personalize the services that you're giving to them for their e government experience or their general operating life experience. Just like Amazon recommends the best things for us to use. If you're senior, you might be told to go nudge and please get your heart checked. But if you're a young person, you may be told of a scholarship that's coming up that may be relevant, or a course that's coming up that may be relevant to you. So it's a good question, and I really want to emphasize that it's not only for senior citizens. Any other questions? Please, Islam, go ahead.
Uh, Hi, good morning. I don't know
Hello.
if it is morning. Thank you very much for the interesting, really contribution. I mean, in addition to, let's say, senior citizens, have you also thought about other vulnerabilities or other vulnerable communities in the society, like I don't know, people with disabilities, for instance, death or vision disability. How can we also maybe include these groups further?
This is such a good point, especially now, finally, that we have more inclusivity and diversity as a fundamental part of ESG reporting for all companies more and more. And in some countries, it's cities are still not giving it enough attention, first of all. But what we do see is, for example, in Singapore, that for wheelchair access, they are retrofitting a lot of the buildings, and they're also retrofitting a lot of the traffic lights, so that if you're a senior citizen or differently abled in any way, you can press a particular button, or eventually I'm sure the artificial intelligence may be able to recognize you. And then for example, the walk sign that one has, one it takes a lot longer and gives you more time to cross the street. In some places in Singapore, we have what are known as gray sidewalks, because the elderly or who are differently able can fall down if they're weak, or if they may be blind. And so you you have a wider sidewalk so that somebody doesn't bump into them when they're going for a jog or something like that. But it's not systematic enough in the whole world, and I think it's a really important point, and we should address it a lot more. I certainly don't see enough emphasis on this. Thank you for raising it. Okay. All right, so let's go to the next pillar. And the next pillar that I have is governance. So there are two parts to governance. One of them is that there are cameras everywhere, there is sensors everywhere. They are looking at security. For example, I was there at 9 during 9/11 when the terrible tragedy happened in New York and so many people died. Some of my friends actually witnessed it. They were on Wall Street. And after that, New York, London, they started putting a lot of cameras everywhere. And New York, they did a lot of work with Microsoft. And the whole point of that was that if there's a bag that's left, it can recognize if it's just left there for a long time. If there's a suspicious person, you can recognize that person. But there is another side to all this as well, which is that the government and private actors who are helping the government to monitor and govern the space, we have to make sure that the data is protected and that is used well. And this is something really new and interesting that's happening, which is that citizens and countries are now saying that this artificial intelligence that you use, this data that you use, my data, your data, you cannot take it out of the country. So, to give you an example, we know that for security and governance, and certainly as a mom, it matters to me a lot. I'm sure it matters to all of you also. Data is fundamental to better services. But it's also important that the government protect our data. In Canada, Google, or Alphabet rather, the parent company of Google, they had a project in Toronto by Sidewalk Labs. It was supposed to be a smart city section of Toronto. And it had all these smart lights where it would be much better at energy consumption. But all the data from the lights and the cameras was going back to servers in the United States because that's where their cloud servers were, right? That's where they hosted their data. But a number of Canadians rose up and said, this is not acceptable to us. We don't want to have a situation in which our data leaves the country and goes to some other country. And more governments are saying the same thing. They are stopping private sector companies from taking their data out. And this is known as data localization. In the same way now, we have artificial intelligence as well. And the European Union has the AI Act. And whether it's the government or the private sector, it's saying, yes, you can use artificial intelligence to help citizens. You can personalize services to them. You can make their lives better. You can make their homes smarter, their streets less polluted. But you cannot harm them or manipulate them in any way. You cannot not protect your AI models. So AI models can be attacked. I don't know if you know this, but AI models can also be attacked. It's called data poisoning. When AI models are attacked, you can poison their data, and so the AI goes whack. And so what you really want to do is you want to protect people from artificial intelligence used by governments and used by companies. And the European Union is excellent in really thinking about all of the frameworks under which risk management is done. And they say, we audit you, and we will audit you. If we audit you and we find that you have not had good governance of your AI, then we will fine you up to 6% of your annual revenue. And we may also do more than that. Now, that's one thing, right? The government is protecting the AI, the data that's being used. It's so important because you don't want the government can use it for good, but there's always a dark side to how AI is used also. Just think about it. You know, in all these elections, fake news, deep fakes, you don't know what's right, what's not right in politics, in anything else. And the government is working to stop these things from happening. Now, the other thing that's very important is that more and more governments now want to use robots and AI, and that's they're in the streets. So in Singapore, we, during the pandemic, had a robot dog from Boston Dynamics, and we don't have a lot of people. We're only 5 million people in Singapore. And the robot dog would roam in the parks. And we were all told about the robot dog in newspapers. The government told us what it was being used for, and we knew exactly what it was there for. Now, the same dog was used in the United States in New York by the police of New York City. It was really there so that if there is any threatening house or any other place, they send the dog in first and it checks if there's a bomb somewhere in that apartment or the house. That's all it does. But because they didn't communicate it properly to their citizens, there was a huge uproar. And what happened as a result was that they had to shut that system down. So I come back to the same thing. Governance without transparency and communication is not possible. If governments are going to use artificial intelligence, which they are, for example, if they are going to use robots that will be able to detect guns, that will be able to detect bombs using artificial intelligence, they need to explain this to the public. In New York, the citizens thought that the robot itself would have a gun and would randomly start killing citizens. So there was a huge miscommunication. And that's very, very important when you think about smart cities. The importance of actually governing the AI and communicating the AI, because there's zero doubt that to have an efficient city, for the reasons I mentioned, you need a digital twin that's full of data and AI. You need great citizen experiences full of data and AI. Then you better make sure that you're protecting your data, you're protecting your AI, and you're communicating it properly with your public. So I see I have a question. Ruchi, please go ahead. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Ruchi.
Hi. Hi, Aisha. I'm so happy to be a part of this meeting, and I'm also an AI trainer. And as of now, I get a lot of, though, sorry, my question is a little out of context as of now. Uh, get a lot of queries about how to be used chat GPT, in their daily work style. I'm also a trainer, so I'm doing chat GPT training for the common people here in Singapore.
Uh, so what's your question? Sorry.
So, how do you think, what are the things as a trainer you think we should prepare ourselves for, like the queries of general public for
Ah,
training them and to, familiarizing them with the AI techniques?
oh, okay. So, well, it is kind of, I suppose, related to smart cities because we need to train people in artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
There's some really great courses, like from Andrew Ng on Coursera, deeplearning.ai. He has a ton of generative AI, introduction to generative AI courses. And then you can check out some generative AI courses on MIT executive research. And then I myself am putting a course together on basics of generative AI, which will be a digital course. So I'm sure you'll find a lot more things like this. Shrijal, please go ahead. Hello.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. Great to be part of this session. Very insightful. Uh, the question I've got two questions. So, my first question is around the sustainability factor from smart cities. I know when we are trying to implement smart cities, we're also considering there's a lot of emphasis on sustainability. But on the contrary, because a smart city is very much dependent upon the technology, uh, dependent upon sensors, etc. So there is a huge amount of e-waste getting generated out of smart cities. So how do we really balance out the sustainability factor? So that's my first question. And the
Yeah.
second one is more coming from an experience because I've been part of a smart city platform in Qatar. What are the potential data collaboration opportunities that you see within smart cities? Because I understand every segment would try to hold on to their data because the data is the new oil, right? Everybody thinks it's the new, it's actually gold for everybody. So how much of traction are you seeing in terms of data collaboration across all the smart cities across globe?
Yeah. Let me start. I think they're both excellent questions. I think let's start with the exchange of information between agencies. So there are two ways that people are collaborating. One is interagency exchange of data, and the second is uh, private public exchange of data. So when you have interagency exchange of data, what we're seeing is the emergence of a GovTech office. We're seeing it in the Middle East. We're also seeing it, of course, here in Singapore. That has become extremely important. Interagencies usually like any agencies in the world or any companies, there are a lot of politics involved. People don't want to really give up their data. So the best thing that a government can do is to have a central hub, which can create, if one could say, like a federated data lake, like a data platform for the entire government. And with APIs, they can access them. And actually, in Singapore, we're seeing a lot more of that. We know in Dubai also, I mean, you're in the region, you know, Dubai now has over 170 services. And so that is another area where I think we have seen that there's a lot of exchange of information. I think that we'll begin to see more and more of that as city agencies are digitizing. If you look at Saudi Arabia, you're seeing that digitization of agencies is happening at high speed in the region. So I think that right now it's not there, but it will happen more and more and more. And if I look at sustainability, I think sustainability is really, really an interesting area. First of all, if you think just about what Spain is doing, right, in smart waste management. So all of these cities are doing different things, whether it's smart water management, smart waste management. But in the case of Madrid, for example, just as an example off the top of my head, you have 11,100 sensors, and what they do is they have a comprehensive smart waste management solution. And what this does is that it allows us to gather with smart bins and others data at the right time so that you can actually um, have less wastage in the city. Another thing that I've seen is that for sustainability, when you have data centers, you know, we talk about sustainability and we talk about using artificial intelligence. Um, it's very, very difficult for us to imagine that data centers themselves that are supposed to help us actually create a lot of um, greenhouse gas emissions. And so, in places like Finland, in places like Ireland, they have taken huge data centers and the heat waste that they have, and they're using it to warm houses. So in Ireland, for example, Meta has its data farms, data serving farms, and they are, going to be heating up to 6,000 homes. So there are many, many ways to not only to use it for sustainability, but also to use it to actually reduce the impact of the AI you're using itself also. And I think that's something that some people miss out on. Thank you, Shreya. Shriram,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, see, I live in New York City, and one of the things that we deal with, or the city deals with, is the traffic. Again, this is at the extreme level, and the approach currently has been, putting tolls getting in, and even though there is a toll of more than $20 to get into Manhattan, I mean, there is, a mile-long queue to get in. And the approach has always been, now it has been, more they're doing congestion tolls. But what I'm asking is, in terms of smart cities, how can AI be used in terms of routing traffic intelligently based on the data? I mean, the city has cameras everywhere, right? So obviously there is data enough to see the traffic pattern, uh, intelligently route or move people around, like a crowdsourcing platform Waze does in a certain way. But in a major, hub like New York, how do you see that playing out?
You know, that's such a good question. And I've been in New York for a long time. So I love that city. But just thinking about, Singapore has been known for transport planning, and it includes, and I'll give you the example of Singapore. Um, it has transport planning. It uses public data, including fare card data, sensors in over 5,000 vehicles, and also real-time bus tracking. And what it does as a result, it uses real-time traffic data to adjust toll rates and manage traffic congestion. So it can redirect things. So if you have a smart traffic management system, it doesn't just you just don't do tolls, you do smart tolls. And the other thing that people are doing is, and I know New York is doing the same thing, which I talked about earlier in Barcelona. I didn't work out with them, but if you have a digital twin, you can actually create an entirely eco smart city that is maybe even partially vehicle free. So, for example, in Tenga in Singapore, it's essentially a forest city. It will have five residential districts with 42,000 houses, but it's basically vehicle free. So what we're seeing is that artificial intelligence then focuses more on AI powered light rail, AI powered trains, and AI powered electrical taxis. If you look at Transport of London (TfL), I think they're also working to expand traffic sensors using AI. They can identify the drivers, the vehicles, and in this way, they're also able to replace manual methods for this. So I think there are lots of ways to do this, and it's not all useful, but Singapore and other cities are giving us fundamentally a way to tackle traffic congestion, either by blocking off zones and redirecting traffic, by dynamically increasing and decreasing poles, and also eventually, I think, by managing traffic congestion automatically by rerouting them in the long run. Thank you, Shriram. So maybe next was, yes, Mr. Shai Omar, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so
Omar,
much. Yeah,
hello.
hello, hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Aisha. It's very, very inspiring and insightful of your mention of smart cities and very comprehensive as well. Your mention of Boston Dynamics robotics, which is Spot the Dog, which brings me to light on the presence of AI-powered robots,
Mhm.
especially what do you call this humanoid robots, for example, from Engineered Arts. Engineered Arts is currently developing this robotic mechanism called Amica, and she is both mechatronic as well as running on generative AI. So she's able to interact and to prompt and then to generate a lot of other AI generated images and objects. So I was wondering, in how many years from now will that be publicly available in smart cities? Considering that we have smart cities, will we be looking into humanoid robots in the streets along our architecture and design of buildings? Also, one thing that I mentioned also with Sriram was mentioning about traffic congestion in cities. This brings me to the equation of using unmanned autonomous vehicles or UAV. I know that London is currently working with the Microsoft UAV, which is called Wave. A few years ago, Google also had years which is called Waymo.
Mhm.
These are autonomous vehicles that are unmanned, so there's no driver there. It's just moving around. So I'm just wondering if in the future smart cities will be predominantly using UAVs, which would help generate lessen the traffic. So those are the two questions that I have in mind. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Omar Ali. First of all, yes, already we have a lot of robots. The difference between generative AI and and by the way, when I was in Tokyo or I'm here in Singapore, I often go to restaurants and even to the swimming club, and all the food is served by robots. But the difference is that they have little eyes and they beep. But because of generative AI, you can actually give them the order without having to press buttons. And we'll see the upgraded robots very soon. And they are able to understand you. So Google DeepMind did this amazing research and created a robot that was given a table full of objects. And the old way or the traditional way of teaching robots is to preload them with information. But in this case, they asked the robot to pick up something, a tiger, from the tabletop. And it was remarkable that the robot had never heard, it had never been trained on a tiger, so it went to the internet and looked at what a tiger was because it was able to search because of generative AI, and then it came back and picked up the tiger. And we're seeing new robotic companies like React built entirely on generative AI. So I think this is absolutely going to happen, and it's absolutely going to happen as well that we are going to have this situation where autonomous vehicles, as I mentioned, they cause less accidents and are not pollutive, are going to be in new districts. Older districts are much more difficult because they're windy roads, they're all of these nooks and corners, and there's a larger chance of accidents. Thank you. Okay, next question. Faisal, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, Aisha.
Hi.
My question is around polarization in the world between Occidental countries and the third world countries. So,
Mm,
already the Occidental countries are way ahead of the technology, e-governance, and all. So, I'm from Nankana. It's a large town in Pakistan where Guru Nanak was born. So every year we have many foreign visitors who are Sikhs who
mm,
come there. Then we have around 250K people who live there. And I see a lot of issues around governance, waste, sanitation, and most importantly, is the unequal distribution of resources and
mhm.
the access to government offices also. The ones who have contacts, they get the they get the access to government resources, and the common people are kind of ignored. So like how do we have some cheaper versions for countries who are already way behind technology? And okay, private companies are doing so much, but when it comes to the government, I think the world needs to think that the polarization needs to, the gap doesn't need to increase with all these countries going with AI, and the third world countries are left way behind. So, I mean, I don't know, you can talk about it when you go to different talk shows, forums on AI, and maybe, highlight this issue.
Faisal, that's such a good point. And this is known as the digital divide, right? People say that this is the biggest fear, that the owners of tech and AI will get ahead and the rest will be left behind. But I think that the example of digital education, digital health, and digital work is really the key for people to have social mobility. When the government is too poor to help, or sometimes there is corruption, such as in many, many emerging markets, sometimes even in the developed world, then people are unjustly left behind. And it's so unfair that people like you and me have jobs and have education, but then there are people in villages in Africa or India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, Brazil, even America that don't have access to it. And sometimes the government can't provide good teachers to everyone. And that's why the public private sector cooperation, which IFC, International Finance Corporation, really encourages in the emerging markets, is so important. If you look at Han Migo is a generative AI chatbot built by the Khan Academy. It's absolutely free. It's a nonprofit, right? What you do is you can take a course, any course, it's like a video course on science, and then you can ask Hanmigo's generative AI assistant to essentially answer you anything. So you may know something really well, and I may not understand the math well. You may not need to ask the question, but I can say to Hanmigo, tell me about this linear algebra equation, and it will explain it to me. So it will personalize the learning to me so I can reach your level. And also, it won't answer questions, so it doesn't let you cheat. So Khan Academy especially built one that nudges you into reasoning. So I'm really optimistic, Faisal, that using AI properly, governing it so that you don't, Hanmigo doesn't first teach you and then try to make you spend money and buy Gucci bags and stuff, but is responsible and ethically governed, which is why regulation is so important. That actually the use of AI in cities will open up our ability to bring everyone away from the wrong side of the digital divide. So I thank you for that question. I think it's very important. Okay, I think we just have a couple of minutes left. Hi, Ali.
So the question is about the connection between smart houses and smart cities,
Yes.
because the people and the smart cities, they are another very important part of building smart cities. So how do you think is the readiness from the people side and the role of smart houses to building the whole smart cities in broader picture? Thank you.
Sorry, when you mean smart houses, do you mean like 3D printed houses, or do you mean smart houses in terms of houses that have sensors and data in them.
Yeah, so IoT based smart houses, and I'm talking about not houses only, it's about people as well, because it's people who will decide whether I want to, transition my home towards a traditional to greenhouse to smart house. So that's,
Yes, yes,
so I'm
yes.
not talking about 3D houses of now.
It's very simple. I think no matter how, unless you're very, very rich, all of us have the same thing. It's all about cost, right?
Hmm.
So the moment you see solar panels, everybody's talking about it. Look, I'm ready too. As long as I can see that I will invest X amount of money, and then after that, what will happen is that I will save money on my electricity bill. And if you tell me that, because inflation is crazy right now, I will invest in it. Maybe I will borrow money for it and from the bank and invest in it and then pay it off because even the interest is less than the money I would save. And that is, I think people don't have to be, AI experts. The job of companies and the job of governments is to provide better, cheaper, more efficient ways for them to live so that they can amplify their own potential. And I believe that people are ready for it. We don't need to use words like IoT and AI to be able to say you will live longer if you have this telehealth conversation, or we will send you the medicine ourselves, or your child will have access to the school. So that would be my recommendation. I think I've worked in villages, I've worked in inner cities, and let me tell you, people are really smart, and I commend them. They're just like you and me when it comes to technology decisions.
Great. And
Thank
and
you.
and then do you think,
Sorry.
no,
Yes,
no problem.
go ahead.
And do you think that will impact to achieve the smart cities vision? Because the people are very important stakeholders. So
Yes.
sustainable city. So it will, so it depends on city to city, country to country, because now it's linked with affordability and how people think. So this journey of achieving smart cities can vary in different part of the world in different time zones.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Eddie. Absolutely. I think they are very important stakeholders. And it's not only their openness, but it's also, for example, you can't do it without 5G, right? You can't have like sensors and everything else. So now, if you look at Bangladesh, it's redoubling its digital transformation efforts. It's enhancing what they already have, the economic opportunities people have, by giving 5G through CSPs or communication service providers in Bangladesh. And now you can have smart homes. You can have the infrastructure that's necessary. And there are already 300 million smart homes around the world, according to some statistics. So people are ready. They're ready to use it. And I think you're absolutely right. They're very important stakeholders, and we need to educate them on how this will benefit them in the long run. Thank you. All right, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. I know we all have to get back to work, but thank you so much for this wonderful session. My next session will actually be on generative AI, and I hope all of you can join. Thank you again for joining, and I hope it was interesting. Take care. Bye bye.